I've been a priest for 3 years now, but nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for this phone call. Father Martinez? The voice was tight, strained. This is Dr. Rebecca Thornton at St. Catherine's Hospital. Bishop Coleman gave me your number. We have a situation here that requires your particular expertise. I almost laughed. Particular expertise. Right. What I had was a certificate from a weekend seminar on exorcism protocols and a leather-bound copy of Exorcisms and Related Supplications that I'd read exactly twice. The most supernatural thing I'd encountered in my 3 years of ministry was Mrs. Patterson's claim that her deceased husband kept moving her reading glasses. What kind of situation, doctor? A 17-year-old girl named Mackenzie Trill. She was brought in 6 days ago, after. There was a pause, and I could hear papers rustling. After she allegedly threw a 42-year-old man across her living room, without touching him. My throat went dry. Allegedly? 5 witnesses, Father, including 2 police officers who responded to the domestic disturbance call. The man was her mother's boyfriend, trying to. Well, let's just say his intentions weren't good. But according to every person in that room, Mackenzie was sitting in a chair across the room when he went flying. I sank into my desk chair, staring at the crucifix on my wall. What do the medical evaluations show? That's just it. Physically, she's perfectly healthy. Mentally. Another pause. We've had her evaluated by our top psychiatrists, Father. Dr. Restrepo, Dr. Kim, even brought in Dr. Harrison from Johns Hopkins via video consultation. No signs of dissociative identity disorder, no evidence of schizophrenia, no psychotic breaks. Her brain scans are completely normal. Then why? Because she knows things she shouldn't know about our staff. Personal things. Things that happened before she was born. Dr. Thornton's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Yesterday, she told one of our nurses exactly how her brother died in Afghanistan in 2009. Described the IED explosion in detail. The nurse never told anyone here about her brother. Ever. A chill ran down my spine. This was it. The call I'd been dreading since Bishop Coleman appointed me as the diocesan exorcist 6 months ago. I was 32 years old, barely out of seminary, and I was supposed to be an expert on something that existed more in horror movies than reality. Father, are you there? Yes, sorry. Have you contacted the family about potentially proceeding with an exorcism evaluation? Her mother requested it. Sarah Trill. She's been Catholic her whole life, apparently. She's the one who asked us to call the diocese. Dr. Thornton paused. Father, I need you to understand something. I've been practicing medicine for 15 years. I don't believe in this stuff, but I can't explain what I've seen, and this girl needs help. I'll be there in an hour. I hung up and stared at my hands. They were shaking. The drive to St. Catherine's gave me time to think, which was probably a mistake. Everything I knew about exorcism came from textbooks and that one weekend seminar in Detroit. Father Kowalski, the instructor, had been performing exorcisms for 23 years. He made it sound clinical, procedural. Follow the protocols, work with medical professionals, document everything. He never mentioned the terror. My phone buzzed with a text from Bishop Coleman. Spoke with Dr. Thornton. Remember your training. Trust the process. Call me after initial evaluation. Trust the process. Right. The process I'd never actually performed. St. Catherine's Hospital smelled like disinfectant and cafeteria food, but there was something else underneath. Something that made my skin crawl. I'd felt it once before, in the basement of an old church in Detroit during the seminar. Father Kowalski had called it spiritual oppression. The atmosphere around genuine possession cases feels different, he'd said. You'll know it when you feel it. Dr. Thornton met me at the elevator on the 5th floor, the psychiatric wing. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with tired eyes and graying brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Father Martinez? Thank you for coming so quickly." Her handshake was firm, professional. "I want to show you something before we go to Mackenzie's room." She led me down a hallway lined with patient rooms, their doors closed and silent. At the end of the hall was a small conference room with a table covered in manila folders and printouts. "These are the incident reports from the last 6 days," she said, gesturing to the papers. "I want you to understand what we're dealing with here." I picked up the first folder. The handwriting was shaky, nervous. Day 1, Nurse Jennifer Walsh. Patient became agitated during routine vitals check. When I attempted to take her blood pressure, the cuff inflated on its own and squeezed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. Patient was across the room at the time. Equipment was checked and found to be functioning normally. My hands were shaking again. I set down the first report and picked up another. Day 3, Dr. Michael Restrepo. During psychiatric evaluation, patient correctly identified the name of my daughter, Emma, and described her appearance accurately despite never having met her. When I asked how she knew this information, patient claimed she told me. When I asked who she was, patient said, "The woman standing behind you. No one else was in the room." "Jesus," I whispered. "There's more, doctor," Thornton said. She handed me a video tablet. "This is from yesterday. Fair warning, it's disturbing." The video showed a standard hospital room. A teenage girl sat on the bed, her back to the camera. She had shoulder-length dark hair and was wearing a hospital gown. Nothing unusual. Then she turned around. The face that looked into the camera wasn't a 17-year-old girl's face. I mean, physically it was. Same features, same bone structure. But the expression, the eyes, they belonged to something else. Something old and mean and intelligent. When she spoke, her voice was wrong. Too deep, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "Tell Father Martinez that his mother is disappointed in him. Tell him she knows about the whiskey he keeps in his desk drawer. Tell him she knows about the doubts that keep him awake at 3 in the morning." The video cut off. I stared at the blank screen, my heart hammering. My mother had been dead for 8 years. And yes, I did keep a small bottle of Jameson in my desk drawer for particularly difficult days. And yes, I did sometimes lie awake at 3 in the morning, wondering if any of this, God, faith, my calling, was real. But how could this girl possibly know that? "How many people have access to this information?" I asked, though my voice sounded far away. "About her mother? None? About your personal habits?" Dr. Thornton shook her head. "Father, we didn't even know who you were until this morning. Bishop Coleman only gave us your name 2 hours ago." I set down the tablet with hands that felt numb. "I need to see her." "Are you sure you're ready for this?" No, I thought. I was 27 years old when I was ordained. I'd wanted to help people, to serve God, to make a difference. I'd never wanted to stare into the face of something that shouldn't exist. But I nodded anyway. The walk to Mackenzie's room felt like a death march. Dr. Thornton filled me in on the protocols they'd established. No one enters alone. All interactions are recorded. Security is posted outside the door 24 hours a day. "Her mother is in there now," she said as we approached room 547. "Fair warning, Sarah Trill is intense. She's convinced her daughter is possessed, and she's not taking wait and see for an answer." Through the small window in the door, I could see a woman in her early 40s sitting beside the hospital bed. She had the same dark hair as her daughter, but where Mackenzie looked young and vulnerable in sleep, Sarah Trill looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past week. The girl in the bed appeared to be sleeping peacefully. She looked so normal. Pale skin, dark eyelashes against her cheeks, the steady rise and fall of her chest. If I hadn't seen the video, I might have thought this was all a mistake. Dr. Thornton knocked softly and opened the door. Mrs. Trill? This is Father Martinez. Sarah Trill looked up, and I saw hope and desperation war in her eyes. She stood quickly, nearly knocking over her chair. Father, thank God you're here. Please, you have to help her. That thing in the video, that's not my daughter. That's not Mackenzie. Mrs. Trill, I understand this is frightening. No, she interrupted, grabbing my arm. You don't understand. My daughter has never spoken to me like that. She's never used language like that. And her voice. Sarah's own voice broke. Father, I carried this girl for 9 months. I've heard her voice every day for 17 years. That was not her voice. I looked down at Mackenzie. She seemed so small in the hospital bed, so young. It was hard to imagine that anything evil could inhabit something so innocent-looking. That's when her eyes opened. For a split second, they were normal. Brown, confused, frightened. The eyes of a 17-year-old girl who didn't understand why she was in a hospital. Mom? Her voice was soft, scared. What's happening? Why am I here? Sarah rushed to her side. Mackenzie, sweetheart, you're in the hospital. You've been sick. This is Father Martinez. He's here to help. Mackenzie looked at me, and I saw the exact moment everything changed. Her eyes shifted, hardened, became something else entirely. When she smiled, it was with too many teeth. Hello, Father, she said, and her voice was the same deep, wrong voice from the video. We've been waiting for you. The temperature in the room dropped at least 10 degrees. My breath came out in visible puffs. Mackenzie? Sarah whispered, backing away from the bed. The thing wearing Mackenzie's face turned to her mother. Mackenzie isn't here right now. But don't worry. She can see everything we're going to do to all of you. She's watching from inside, screaming. That's when the machines started going haywire. The heart monitor began beeping frantically, showing a heart rate of over 200 beats per minute. The IV stand started shaking violently. The fluorescent lights above us flickered and buzzed, and Mackenzie, or whatever was inhabiting her, sat up in bed without using her hands. Just rose straight up like she was being pulled by invisible strings. Get out, Dr. Thornton said quietly. Everyone out, now. But as we moved toward the door, it slammed shut. The lock engaged with a loud click. Mackenzie's head turned toward me with a motion that was too smooth, too fluid. Going somewhere, Father? But we just met. Don't you want to know why your God let your mother suffer so much before she died? Don't you want to know why he took her when you prayed so hard for him to save her? My knees almost buckled. My mother had died of ovarian cancer after a 6-month battle that had destroyed our family's faith, as much as it had destroyed her body. I had prayed every day, every hour, begging God to heal her. Instead, I watched her waste away in a hospital bed not unlike this one. How do you know about that? I whispered. I know lots of things, Mackenzie said, her voice now sounding like multiple people speaking in unison. I know about the night you almost left the seminary. I know about the woman at the coffee shop you think about when you touch yourself. I know about the time you stole $20 from the collection plate when you were 12. Each word hit like a physical blow. These weren't lucky guesses or information someone could have researched. These were secrets I'd never told anyone. Sins I'd confessed only in the privacy of my own heart. Stop it, Sarah sobbed from beside the door. Please, stop it. Give me back my daughter. Mackenzie's head swiveled toward her mother, and when she smiled, her teeth looked different. Sharper. Your daughter is quite comfortable where she is. Would you like to know what she's thinking right now? She's thinking about how much she hates you, how she wishes you had died instead of her father, how she blames you for everything that's wrong with her life. That's not true, Sarah whispered. Isn't it? Remember when she was 14 and you found her with those razor blades? She wasn't cutting herself because she was sad, Sarah. She was cutting herself because she couldn't stand the thought of becoming like you. Weak, pathetic, clinging to a dead man's memory instead of living her own life. I forced myself to step forward. According to my training, I was supposed to remain calm, follow protocol, work with the medical team. But this wasn't theoretical anymore. This was real, and it was destroying this family right in front of me. "In the name of Jesus Christ," I said, my voice stronger than I felt, "I command you to stop." Mackenzie's laugh was like broken glass. "Oh, that's adorable. The baby priest thinks he has authority here. Tell me, Father, do you really believe the words you're saying? Or are you just reciting lines you memorized in school?" She was right, and we both knew it. The words felt hollow in my mouth, empty ritual with no power behind them. How could I cast out evil when I wasn't even sure I believed in God anymore? The lights went out. In the darkness, I heard Sarah scream. I heard Dr. Thornton curse. I heard the sound of furniture moving, scraping across the floor. And I heard Mackenzie's voice, now coming from everywhere at once, whispered directly into my ear. "This is just the beginning, Father. Wait until you see what I can really do." When the emergency lighting kicked in a few seconds later, casting everything in hellish red light, Mackenzie was standing beside her bed. Standing, even though she should have been weak from 6 days of medical tests and minimal food. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that she was floating 6 inches off the ground. Dr. Thornton was pressing the emergency button on her pager with shaking hands. Sarah was pressed against the door, sobbing. And I was standing in the middle of it all, 27 years old and completely out of my depth, watching a teenage girl hover in the air like gravity was optional. "Now," Mackenzie said, her feet still dangling above the floor, "shall we talk about why you're really here? It's not to save my soul, Father. It's because you need to know if any of this is real. You need to know if God exists, or if you've wasted your entire life believing in fairy tales." She was right. Even as my rational mind tried to find explanations, hidden wires, elaborate hoax, mass hallucination, part of me was relieved. Terrified, but relieved. Because if this was real, if evil existed, then maybe, good existed too. The door burst open as security guards poured in, followed by more medical staff. But they all stopped dead when they saw Mackenzie floating in the air, her hospital gown billowing around her like she was underwater. "Everyone out except Father Martinez," she said, without looking away from me. "We have business to discuss." "Like hell," Dr. Thornton said, but as she spoke, an invisible force shoved her backward into the hallway. The same force pushed out the security guards, Sarah, and everyone else until it was just me and the thing wearing Mackenzie Trill's face. The door slammed shut again. "Much better," Mackenzie said, and slowly lowered herself back to the ground. "Now we can have an honest conversation." I tried to speak, but no words came out. My mouth was too dry, my heart was beating too fast. "You want to know what I am," she said, walking toward me with movements that were too smooth, too graceful. "You want to know if I'm really a demon, or if this is all some elaborate trick. The truth is more complicated than your little seminary textbooks prepared you for." She stopped inches from my face. Her breath smelled like sulfur and decay. "I am old, Father. I was already ancient when your Christ was nailed to his tree. I have walked through civilizations that your species has forgotten. I have whispered in the ears of emperors and kings, saints and sinners. And now I'm talking to a frightened little boy who calls himself a priest." "What do you want?" I managed to whisper. Mackenzie smiled, and for just a moment, I saw something else behind her eyes. Something vast and malevolent and patient. "I want you to understand that everything you believe is wrong. Your God doesn't care about you. He doesn't answer prayers. He doesn't save the innocent or punish the wicked. He sits in his heaven and watches his creation tear itself apart, and he does nothing. Each word was like a knife in my chest, because part of me, the part that had watched my mother die, that had seen children suffer, that had buried too many good people who deserved better, agreed with every syllable. Your mother called out for him at the end, Mackenzie continued. Did you know that? When the pain got too bad and the morphine stopped working, she begged him to either heal her or let her die. But he ignored her, just like he ignores everyone else. I wanted to argue, to defend my faith, to recite scripture about God's plan and mysterious ways. But the words wouldn't come, because I remembered those nights in the hospital, listening to my mother's ragged breathing, praying until my knees bled, and receiving nothing but silence in return. You can feel it, can't you? Mackenzie whispered. The doubt growing inside you like a cancer. It's been there since the day she died, eating away at your faith one prayer at a time. Soon there'll be nothing left but questions and emptiness. She was right. She was absolutely right, and I hated her for it. But I can offer you something your God never will, she said, reaching out to touch my face with fingers that felt like ice. I can offer you certainty. I can show you exactly how the universe really works. No faith required, no hope needed. Just cold, beautiful truth. For a moment, just a moment, I was tempted. The idea of no longer struggling with doubt, of no longer lying awake at 3 a.m. wondering if I was wasting my life, was seductive beyond words. Then I thought about Mackenzie, the real Mackenzie, trapped somewhere inside her own body, watching this thing use her face to torment her mother. I thought about Sarah Trill, who had lost her husband and now might lose her daughter. I thought about all the people who had turned to faith, not because it was easy, but because it was the only thing standing between them and despair. No, I said. Mackenzie's smile faltered for the first time. No? No, I repeated louder this time. I don't know if God exists. I don't know if any of this means anything. But I know that little girl doesn't deserve what you're doing to her. And neither does her mother. Something changed in Mackenzie's expression. For just a second, I saw fear. You think your uncertainty makes you weak, she said, but her voice was less confident now. But it doesn't, does it? It just makes you more human. And that's when I understood something my seminary textbooks had never taught me. Faith isn't about certainty. It's about choosing to act with compassion, even when you don't have all the answers. It's about standing up to evil, even when you're not sure good will win. In the name of Jesus Christ, I said, and this time the words felt different in my mouth. I command you to release this girl. Mackenzie laughed, but it sounded forced. You still don't believe, Father. I can hear the doubt in your voice. You're right, I said. I don't know if I believe, but I'm going to act like I do anyway, because that girl needs someone to fight for her. The lights began to flicker again. The temperature dropped until I could see my breath in white puffs, and somewhere, distantly, I could swear I heard the sound of chains rattling. Mackenzie's face contorted with rage. You think you've won something? This is just the beginning. By the time I'm done with you, you'll beg me to take your faith away. The door burst open again, and this time it was Bishop Coleman himself, flanked by 3 other priests I didn't recognize. Behind them were Dr. Thornton and Sarah Trill. Father Martinez, Bishop Coleman said, his voice calm but urgent. Step away from the patient. I backed toward the door, but I kept my eyes on Mackenzie. She was watching the newcomers with an expression of pure hatred. Ah, she said, her voice returning to that horrible multi-toned whisper. The cavalry arrives. Tell me, Your Excellency, do you still have nightmares about the Brennan boy? Bishop Coleman's face went white. I'd never heard of any Brennan boy, but apparently Mackenzie's ability to know impossible things extended to everyone. Father Harrison, Father O'Brien, the bishop said to 2 of the priests, Please begin the preliminary prayers. Father Kowalski. Father Kowalski. My instructor from the seminar, he was here. Prepare the ritual space. We're going to need to do this properly. As the priests began setting up, Mackenzie turned her attention back to me. This isn't over, Father. You may think you've chosen your side, but I know the truth about you. I know what you really are underneath all that pious pretending. What am I? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Mackenzie smiled one last time, and her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire room. You're exactly like me. You just haven't admitted it yet. Then her eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed to the floor like a puppet with cut strings. But even as the medical team rushed to check her vitals, even as Bishop Coleman began organizing the formal exorcism protocols, I couldn't stop thinking about her final words. Because deep down, in a place I didn't want to examine too closely, I was afraid she might be right. 3 hours later, Mackenzie's hospital room had been transformed into something I'd only seen in training videos. Father Kowalski had arranged chairs in a semicircle around the bed. A small table by the window held a crucifix, holy water, blessed salt, and a collection of sacred relics I couldn't identify. The harsh fluorescent lights had been replaced with softer lamps that cast long shadows across the walls. 8 of us were present for the formal exorcism. Bishop Coleman, Father Kowalski as the primary exorcist, Father Harrison and Father O'Brien as assistants, Dr. Thornton and Dr. Restrepo as medical observers, Sarah Trill and me. The minimum required by church protocol was actually 12, but Bishop Coleman had made an exception given the urgent circumstances. This is not like the movies, Father Kowalski had explained to everyone as we prepared. There will be no head spinning, no projectile vomiting, no levitation. He paused, glancing at me. Well, probably no levitation. What we're dealing with is a spiritual battle, not a physical confrontation. Mackenzie had been unconscious since her collapse 3 hours earlier. Her vital signs were stable, but Dr. Thornton kept checking her tablet with increasing frequency. Something was bothering her. Father Kowalski, she said finally, I need to show you something. She pulled up Mackenzie's latest brain scan on her tablet. Even I could see that something was wrong. There were dark areas that hadn't been there in previous scans. What are we looking at? Bishop Coleman asked. Lesions, Dr. Restrepo answered, leaning over Dr. Thornton's shoulder. Multiple lesions throughout the temporal and frontal lobes. But here's the thing. These weren't present in any of her previous scans. They've appeared in the last 3 hours. Is that medically possible? Father O'Brien asked. No, Dr. Thornton said bluntly. Lesions like this should take months or years to develop. They don't just appear overnight. And they certainly don't appear in these patterns. She swiped to another image. The lesions formed a distinctly symmetrical pattern, almost like, they look like writing, Sarah whispered. She was right. The dark spots on Mackenzie's brain scan looked almost like symbols or letters in some unknown language. That's not possible, Doctor. Restrepo muttered, but he couldn't take his eyes off the screen. Neither is throwing a grown man across a room without touching him, Father Kowalski said. I think we're past the point of medical possibility. As if summoned by our conversation, Mackenzie's eyes suddenly opened. But this time, they weren't brown. They were completely black, like someone had filled them with ink. Hello again, she said, her voice that same horrible multi-toned whisper from before. Are we ready to begin? Father Kowalski stepped forward, holding a worn leather prayer book. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, we call upon the power of Christ to... Mackenzie's laugh cut him off. It was the sound of breaking glass mixed with a child's giggle. Oh, Father Kowalski. Still using the same old prayers, I see. They didn't work on the Brennan boy, did they? Poor little Timothy. Do you still hear him screaming in your dreams? Father Kowalski's hands trembled slightly, but his voice remained steady. "I command you, unclean spirit, to tell us your name." "Names have power, priest." "Why would I give you mine?" Mackenzie sat up in bed with that same impossible fluid motion. "But I'll tell you this. I've been waiting for this moment for a very long time. 17 years, to be precise." "What do you mean?" Bishop Coleman asked. Mackenzie's head turned toward him with emotion that went too far, like an owl's. "Did you really think this was random? Did you think I just happened to choose this girl in this city at this time?" She laughed again. "I've been planning this since before she was born." Sarah made a strangled sound from her chair. "What are you talking about?" "Tell them, Sarah," Mackenzie said, her black eyes fixed on her mother. "Tell them about the night you made that deal." "I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah whispered, but her face had gone pale. "November 15th, 2006, Mackenzie continued. "You were 8 months pregnant. Your husband had been dead for 3 months. You were sitting in your car outside the bridge on Highway 94, thinking about driving off it. Thinking about ending it all, you and the baby. The room had gone completely silent except for the quiet hum of medical equipment. That's when I came to you," Mackenzie said. "Not in this form, of course. I appeared as an angel of light, just like the scriptures warn about. I told you I could take away your pain. I told you I could make sure your daughter would be strong, that she would never suffer like you were suffering." Sarah was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "All I asked in return was a small favor, just a tiny little promise. Do you remember what you promised me, Sarah?" "Stop," Sarah whispered. "You promised me that when your daughter turned 17, when she was old enough to choose her own path, you would let me speak with her. Just a conversation. Nothing more." "I was desperate," Sarah sobbed. "My husband was dead. I had no money, no job, no way to take care of a baby. You said it was just talking." "And it was," Mackenzie said. "At first, but your daughter is special. She has a gift for seeing things others can't. It made her so much more interesting than I initially expected." Father Kowalski stepped forward again. "By the power of Christ, I command you to release this girl from your—" The words died in his throat as every piece of medical equipment in the room began beeping and buzzing at once. The lights flickered. The temperature dropped so rapidly that ice began forming on the windows. And Mackenzie began to rise from the bed. Not sitting up, rising. Her entire body lifted into the air until she was floating 3 feet above the mattress, her arms spread wide like she was crucified on invisible wood. "Your Christ has no power here," she said, and her voice now sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. "This is my domain now. This girl belongs to me." That's when the screaming started. At first, I thought it was Sarah, but the sound was coming from Mackenzie herself, not from her mouth, but from somewhere deep inside her, like another voice trying to claw its way out. "Help me," the screaming voice said, and it sounded young and terrified and completely human. "Please help me, I can't get out, I can't—" The scream cut off abruptly, and Mackenzie's black eyes focused on me with laser intensity. "She's still in there," I said before I could stop myself. "The real Mackenzie is still in there." "Of course she is," the thing said through Mackenzie's mouth. "Where else would she be? I want her to see everything I'm going to do. I want her to watch while I destroy everyone she loves." "Why?" The question came from Dr. Thornton, who had been silent since the brain scans. "Why are you doing this?" Mackenzie's head swiveled toward her with that horrible owl-like motion. "Because I can. Because her mother invited me in. Because this is what humans do. You make bargains you don't understand, then act surprised when the bill comes due." "The deal is with me," Sarah said, standing up from her chair. "Let her go and take me instead." "Oh, Sarah," Mackenzie said, floating gently back down to the bed. "You still don't understand. The deal was never about possession. It was about choice. When your daughter turned 17, I was going to offer her the same thing I offered you, a way to take away her pain." "What pain?" Sarah asked. Mackenzie smiled, and for the first time, it looked genuinely happy. "Tell her, Mackenzie. Tell your mother about the pain." Suddenly, Mackenzie's voice changed. The horrible multi-toned whisper was gone, replaced by the scared, confused voice of a teenage girl. "Mom," she said, and her eyes were brown again, filled with tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I never told you about Dad." "What about Dad?" Sarah asked, moving closer to the bed. "About how he really died," Mackenzie sobbed. "It wasn't the cancer, Mom. He killed himself. The night before he was supposed to start chemotherapy. He left me a note." Sarah staggered backward like she'd been slapped. "That's not true. He died in his sleep. The doctor said—" "The doctor lied," Mackenzie continued in her normal voice. "Dad asked him to. He didn't want you to know, but he left me a letter explaining everything. He said he couldn't stand the thought of you watching him waste away. He said it would be easier for everyone if he just went to sleep." "No," Sarah whispered. "I found the letter in his desk drawer the morning after the funeral. I've been carrying it for 3 years, Mom. I've been carrying his secret, and it's been eating me alive." The room was completely silent except for Sarah's quiet sobbing. I could see the truth in her face. She believed it. She knew her daughter wasn't lying. "That's when I came to her," the thing said, and Mackenzie's voice changed back to that horrible whisper. 3 months ago, when the guilt finally became too much to bear, I offered to take it away. All of it. The pain, the guilt, the memories. All she had to do was let me in. But I changed my mind, Mackenzie said, her voice normal again. At the last second, I changed my mind. I told it no. "Yes," the thing agreed. But by then, it was too late. The door was already open. Father Kowalski had been listening to this exchange with growing understanding. "The possession wasn't forced," he said. "She invited it in voluntarily, then tried to refuse it. That's why the standard prayers aren't working. Technically, she consented." "Very good, priest," the thing said. "The girl opened the door herself. Now the only way to close it is for her to choose to do so. But she's too weak, too broken, too guilty. She'll never find the strength." "Yes, I will." The voice was Mackenzie's, but different somehow, stronger. "I made a mistake," she continued. "I was hurting, and I thought this was the only way to make it stop. But I won't let you use me to hurt my mother." The thing inside her laughed. "You think you can fight me? I am eternal. You're a parasite," Mackenzie interrupted. "You feed on pain and guilt and fear. But I'm not giving you mine anymore." The temperature in the room began to rise. The ice on the windows started melting. "Mom," Mackenzie said, turning to Sarah, "I need you to know that what Dad did, that wasn't your fault. He was sick, and he was scared, and he made a choice. But it wasn't because he didn't love us. Mackenzie, and I need you to know that I don't blame you for anything. Not for the deal you made, not for Dad's death, not for any of it. You were just trying to protect me." Sarah was crying harder now, but she managed to nod. "I forgive you, Mom, and I forgive myself." The thing inside Mackenzie let out a shriek of rage that sounded like it came from the bottom of hell itself. The lights exploded, showering us with glass. The medical equipment began sparking and smoking. But Mackenzie kept talking, her voice growing stronger with every word. "I choose to let go of the guilt. I choose to let go of the pain. I choose to forgive my father for leaving us. And I choose to forgive myself for being angry at him." "No!" the thing screamed through her mouth. "You can't! The door is open! The invitation was given! And now I'm taking it back," Mackenzie said firmly. "I revoke my consent. I revoke my invitation. In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave me alone." The sound that came from Mackenzie's throat was like nothing I'd ever heard. Part scream, part roar, part the sound of something large and ancient being torn apart. Her body convulsed violently, arching off the bed until only her head and heels were touching the mattress. Then suddenly she collapsed. The room fell silent. The sparking equipment went quiet. The only sound was our collective breathing and Sarah's quiet sobs. Dr. Thornton rushed to check Mackenzie's vitals while the rest of us waited in tense silence. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, she looked up with a confused expression. "She's fine," she said. "Heart rate normal, breathing normal, brain activity normal." "What about the lesions?" Dr. Restrepo asked. Dr. Thornton checked her tablet, then checked it again. "They're gone. The brain scan is completely normal." Mackenzie's eyes fluttered open. When she looked at us, they were brown and clear and completely, obviously human. "Mom?" she said weakly. "Is it over?" Sarah was at her side immediately, pulling her daughter into a fierce hug. "It's over, baby. It's over." As I watched them hold each other, I realized something had changed in me too. The crushing doubt that had been my constant companion for years wasn't gone. I wasn't sure it would ever be completely gone. But it felt manageable, like a chronic pain that you learn to live with instead of letting it define you. Maybe faith wasn't about certainty after all. Maybe it was about choosing to believe in love and forgiveness and hope even when, especially when, those things seemed impossible. "Father Martinez?" Mackenzie's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She was looking at me with eyes that were tired, but alert. "Thank you." "I didn't do anything," I said honestly. "Yes, you did," she said. "You believed I was worth saving even when I didn't believe it myself." As we began cleaning up the room and preparing to leave, Bishop Coleman pulled me aside. "How do you feel?" he asked. It was a strange question, but I knew what he meant. "Different," I said. "Still confused about a lot of things, but different." He nodded. "Good. If this job doesn't change you, you're not doing it right." 3 weeks later, I was back in my office trying to write my official report on the Mackenzie Trill case. The church required detailed documentation of all exorcism attempts, including a theological analysis of what had occurred. But how do you write a report about watching a teenage girl choose forgiveness over hatred, hope over despair? How do you document the moment when someone decides that love is stronger than the darkness inside them? My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. "Father Martinez? This is Dr. Kim at Presbyterian Hospital. We have a situation here that requires your particular expertise." I almost smiled. 3 weeks ago, those words would have terrified me. Now they just made me tired. "What kind of situation, doctor?" "A 12-year-old boy named Marcus. He was brought in yesterday after." There was a pause, and I could hear the familiar sound of papers rustling. "After he allegedly made all the windows in his house explode simultaneously." I reached for my keys and my copy of Exorcisms and Related Supplications. The leather was already starting to show wear from use. "I'll be there in an hour," I said. Because whatever else I might doubt about God or faith or the meaning of existence, I knew one thing for certain. There were people out there who needed help. And sometimes, just sometimes, that help came in the form of a confused young priest who was willing to stand up to the darkness, even when he wasn't sure the light was real. As I drove toward the hospital, I thought about Mackenzie Trill, who was back in school now and seeing a therapist twice a week. I thought about Sarah, who had started attending Mass again for the first time since her husband's death. I thought about the letter from her father that Mackenzie had finally shown her, a letter that said goodbye, but also said how much he loved them both. And I thought about the thing that had possessed her, that ancient malevolent presence that fed on human pain. It was still out there somewhere, looking for other broken people to exploit. There would be other cases, Other families torn apart by secrets and guilt and despair. But there would also be people willing to fight back. People willing to choose forgiveness over hatred, hope over despair, love over fear. People willing to believe that even in the darkest places, even when all seems lost, there is always a choice. And sometimes, that choice is enough to change everything.